She hid a wounded Apache in her cellar. The Army never found what they were looking for. Sarah Callahan wiped her brow with the back of her hand as the Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on her small homestead. It was the summer of 1878, and tensions between settlers and the Apache were at their peak. 3 months ago, her husband Thomas had left with a surveying party and never returned. The Army reported finding his body along with the others, victims of what they called an Apache raid. But Sarah had her doubts. She was gathering eggs from the henhouse when she heard it. A soft groan coming from the edge of her property where the desert met her small vegetable garden. Clutching her basket tightly, she approached cautiously. Among the withering cornstalks lay a man, an Apache warrior, blood seeping through his clothing from what appeared to be a gunshot wound to his side. Their eyes met, his filled with both pain and distrust. Sarah's instinct was to run for her rifle, to call for help from the neighboring homestead a mile away. But something stopped her. The man's gaze reminded her of Thomas, not in appearance, but in the quiet dignity she recognized there. "The Army will be here soon," she whispered, though she knew he might not understand her words. "They always patrol after sundown." As if to confirm her warning, dust clouds appeared on the horizon. With a decision that would change her life forever, Sarah put down her basket and helped the wounded man to his feet. He was weak but conscious, leaning heavily against her as she guided him to the root cellar beneath her cabin. "I don't know why I'm doing this," she muttered, helping him down the ladder. "God help me if they find you here." She managed to conceal him just as the sound of hoofbeats approached. Captain Reynolds and his men circled her property, their usual patrol more thorough than normal. "Evening, Mrs. Callahan." Reynolds tipped his hat. "Seen anything unusual today? We're tracking a band of Apache. One of them's wounded, shot in." "The engagement this morning." Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. "Nothing unusual, Captain. Just tending my garden and chickens." Reynolds studied her face. "You shouldn't be out here alone, ma'am, not with what happened to Thomas. These savages don't show mercy." Sarah stiffened. "I manage well enough." After the soldiers departed, Sarah stood frozen, questioning her decision. Below her feet lay an injured Apache warrior, a man her neighbors would call enemy. Yet something in her rebelled against that simple narrative. Her husband had often spoken of the Apache people with respect, questioning the military's heavy-handed approach. As night fell, Sarah descended into the cellar with clean cloths, water, and what little medicine she had. The warrior watched her warily as she approached. "My name is Sarah," she said slowly, pointing to herself. "I'm going to try to help you." 2 weeks passed with the Apache warrior hidden in Sarah's root cellar. She learned his name was Nietzsche, which he explained meant mischievous one in his language. As his strength gradually returned, they developed a system of communication, part broken English, part hand gestures, and part intuition. Sarah discovered Nietzsche wasn't part of any raiding party. He belonged to a small band trying to remain free while others of his people had been forced onto reservations. They had been hunting when Army scouts spotted them, opening fire without provocation. "My brother," Nietzsche explained one evening, his voice low. "Soldiers take him, many others." Sarah nodded, understanding his loss. "My husband," she responded. "Gone too." Captain Reynolds continued his regular patrols, each visit more suspicious than the last. Sarah noticed how his eyes lingered on her garden, particularly the area where she'd found Nietzsche. During his most recent visit, he'd dismounted and walked the perimeter of her property. "Planning on staying out here much longer, Mrs. Callahan?" he'd asked. "Most widows head back east. After what you've been through." "This is my home now, Captain," she'd replied firmly. At night, Sarah would bring food to Nietzsche and sit with him by lamplight. He taught her Apache words while she read to him from Thomas's books. One evening, she brought down her husband's journal, showing Nietzsche the sketches Thomas had made of Apache dwellings and ceremonies. "Your husband? He knew my people?" Nietzsche asked, carefully turning the pages. "He respected them," Sarah answered. "He was mapping the territory but wrote about the injustice he witnessed. He believed there could be peace, Naiche nodded slowly, then reached inside his shirt and withdrew something wrapped in leather, a small carved stone figure of an eagle. "This belonged to my father," he explained. "Now to you for protection." Sarah accepted the gift, emotion tightening her throat. That night, as she lay in bed above the cellar where Naiche slept, she confronted a truth she'd been avoiding. She was beginning to care for him not just as someone in need, but as a man with dreams and sorrows, not unlike her own. Outside, a summer storm rolled across the desert, lightning illuminating the landscape in brief, brilliant flashes. Sarah wondered about Naiche's people, if they were searching for him, if they believed him dead. She wondered if she could truly help him escape when the time came, and what that would mean for her, a widow harboring someone the army considered an enemy. Before dawn, she was awakened by urgent knocking. Heart pounding, she opened the door to find Mrs. Peterson from the neighboring homestead. "Sarah, thank heavens you're all right," the older woman exclaimed. "The army's conducting house-to-house searches tomorrow. They're convinced there are Apache spies among us." Sarah spent the day in frantic preparation. The army would search every corner of her property. This she knew with certainty. Captain Reynolds had grown increasingly fixated on her homestead, his eyes cold and calculating during each visit. She needed to create a better hiding place than the root cellar. When Mrs. Peterson left, Sarah immediately went to Naiche. His wound had healed enough that he could move without assistance, though pain still shadowed his features. "The army comes tomorrow," she explained, mimicking the action of searching. "They will look everywhere." Naiche's expression remained calm, but Sarah saw the subtle tightening of his jaw. He had prepared himself for this possibility from the beginning. Working together through the afternoon heat, they devised a plan. Thomas had built the cabin with a false wall in the bedroom, a small space intended as a hiding place during Apache raids, an irony not lost on Sarah. They carefully moved Naiche's few possessions into this space, along with water and provisions. "If they find me," Naiche said quietly as the sun began to set, "run. Say I threatened you." Sarah shook her head firmly. "No, this is my choice." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat by the window watching the distant lights of torches as the army moved from homestead to homestead. Around midnight, she heard Naiche climbing the ladder from the cellar. He stood in her doorway, straight and dignified despite his injury. "My people are close," he said. 3 days' journey west in the high canyon lands, I must return." Sarah felt her heart constrict. "After the search," she insisted. "One more day." Dawn arrived with the sound of hoofbeats. Captain Reynolds led a detachment of 12 men who surrounded her property. When Sarah opened the door, the captain removed his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Mrs. Callahan, I'm afraid we need to conduct a thorough search of your property. Military orders." Sarah stepped aside. "Of course, Captain. May I ask what you're looking for?" Reynolds' smile didn't reach his eyes. "Intelligence suggests Apache scouts have been using homesteads as observation posts. Some settlers might be harboring them. Unknowingly, of course." The soldiers methodically searched every room, overturning furniture and emptying cupboards. When they reached the root cellar, Reynolds descended himself, spending nearly 20 minutes examining the space. Sarah's heart nearly stopped when he ran his hand along the exact spot where Naiche had originally rested. "Interesting," Reynolds remarked, rubbing dirt between his fingers. "Blood, perhaps. I slaughtered a chicken down here last week," Sarah replied evenly. Coyotes had been getting into the henhouse. The search continued to the barn and outbuildings. One soldier discovered the disturbed earth where Sarah had first found Naiche. "Captain, tracks here." Reynolds examined the area, his expression triumphant. "Someone was dragged from here and toward the house." His eyes met Sarah's. "Care to explain that, Mrs. Callahan?" Sarah felt sweat beading on her forehead. "I told you about the chicken, Captain. I dragged a crate of vegetables from the garden." For a terrible moment, she thought Reynolds would order his men into the bedroom to examine the walls more carefully. Instead, he gave a curt nod. "We'll be moving on then. "But I'll be back, Mrs. Callahan. Something isn't right here." As the soldiers mounted their horses, Reynolds lingered. "You know, your husband kept interesting company. His journals contained sympathetic views of the Apache, almost treasonous, some might say." Sarah's blood ran cold. "My husband was a good man, and good men don't always make loyal Americans," Reynolds replied before riding away. That night, Sarah helped Nyshay emerge from his hiding place. His face was drawn with pain from the long confinement, but his eyes remained alert and watchful. "They will return," he said. "Not a question, but a certainty." Sarah nodded. Reynolds suspects something. He mentioned Thomas's journals. They sat at Sarah's small table while she explained her plan. She would take Nyshay as far as Willow Creek at first light, where the terrain offered cover for his journey to rejoin his people. She would return before Reynolds could organize another search. "And after?" Nyshay asked. "They will watch you now." Sarah had considered this problem through the long hours of the search. "I'm selling the homestead. Mrs. Peterson's son in California has offered to buy it. I'll go east to my sister in Boston." Something flickered across Nyshay's face. Surprise, perhaps regret. "You leave because of me." "I leave because I finally understand what Thomas knew," Sarah replied. "There's no place for me here, not in a land where men like Reynolds decide what's right." As dawn approached, Sarah gathered provisions and her husband's old mare. She packed Thomas's journals carefully. The truth they contained was too dangerous to leave behind. When everything was ready, she found Nyshay standing before the small altar where she kept her Bible and Thomas's photograph. "Your husband," he said, touching the image gently. "He died near Snake Canyon." Sarah froze. "The army said it was an Apache attack." Nyshay shook his head slowly. "My cousin witnessed. Not Apache. Men in soldier clothes, but not all soldiers. Some were." He searched for the word. "Map makers like him. Argument about boundaries, gold found in those hills." The revelation settled over Sarah like a physical weight. She had suspected something wasn't right about Thomas's death, but this was worse than she had imagined. They rode double on the mare until they reached Willow Creek just as the sun crested the horizon. From here, Nyshay would travel alone through territory he knew well. "The Eaglestone," he said as he prepared to leave. "Keep it close. It will guard your journey." Sarah touched the carved figure hanging from a leather cord around her neck. "What your people seek, is it safety? A home?" "Freedom," Nyshay answered simply. "To live as we have always lived." Sarah nodded, understanding at last. "That's what Thomas wanted for you. What I want too." Nyshay took her hand briefly, his touch conveying what words could not. Then he turned and began walking westward, his figure gradually blending with the landscape he belonged to. 3 days later, when Captain Reynolds returned with a formal search warrant, he found the Callahan homestead empty, a "for sale" sign posted at the gate. Sarah was already miles away on an eastbound train, Thomas's journals safely hidden among her belongings. The army never found what they were looking for. Not Nyshay, and not the evidence that would have exposed the truth about Thomas Callahan's death. Years later, in a comfortable Boston parlor, Sarah would sometimes take out the Eaglestone and remember the summer that changed everything, when an injured Apache warrior taught her the true meaning of humanity, and in saving him, she had somehow saved herself. In her most private moments, she wondered about Nyshay, if he had found his people, if he had survived the campaigns that followed. She hoped that somewhere in the high canyon lands of Arizona, he remembered the widow who had hidden him in her basement, and in doing so, discovered what she had been searching for all along: the courage to stand for what was right, no matter the cost.